Welcome back to Teacher's Best Friend, a podcast where we share practical ideas to make teaching more fun and effective. I'm Ken Scheel, the founder of KEVA Planks, and I have the privilege of interviewing Ellis Kirkdorffer, an architect and university professor. We'll wrap up our discussion on the importance of three-dimensional thinking and hands-on learning today. That's ironic, the things you're describing and how our tendency is to explore what if we made the planks just a little bit different or added another piece, or people suggest that we add these things. And we've toyed with that. We've made colored blocks, and we still have a short run of colored blocks that we may bring out eventually. But every time you add another element, whether it's a color or a shape or a size or anything like that, it starts to diminish the actual magic of you don't have to sort pieces. They're all the same, and your brain starts to work with that. So we have this natural inclination to start to complicate things.
Yes, and it's called the design process.
Yeah,
that's design thinking. We hear about design thinking all the time, but that's originally it's going way back. It's the scientific method, but engineers have used that process of I don't know. You've probably seen the circular graphic where it's with your design problem, you start with research and empathy, so you kind of figure out what's the issue from the user's standpoint, how do they feel about it, how does it affect them, and then you define the problem and you come up with ideas, and then you prototype and test the ideas, and then it goes around again and again. But it's so interesting because it is human nature, I think, to sort of what else could we do? Right. And I've seen I love color, but like you're saying, like having to sort them out, that definitely complicates it. So I have a lot of, colorful building blocks, but I spend most of my time, if we play with them, sorting do you have this specialty piece? Do you have this specialty? And we don't ever play, playing is sorting at that point. And so these are lovely because and then when they're stored in a big bin, everyone just shovel them back in, and then we get them out. So that it's genius on so many levels, it's easy to play with, easy to clean up.
The interesting thing, since I dabbled a lot with developing sort of some colored KEVA planks, and then playing with them and watching other people play with them. And as soon as you don't sort for color, your structures start to look terrible because all the colors are mixed in, and something that looks very artistic and sophisticated when everything is natural wood and you're just looking at the form of it. When you start mixing all the different colors together, if you just randomly put that, it loses much of the beauty, and it looks childish, and it looks like, I don't want that up in my house very long.
Right.
And so that was interesting to see sort of the difference between just enjoying the form of something in a uniform color versus how you can mess that up. But you can also, if you stay organized and don't throw all the colors back, and you work kind of like a painter's palette, you say, these are my blues and these are my reds. What am I going to do with those? And strategically go. Then people tend to use the colors thoughtfully, and it does enhance and change it. But a lot of people get tired of that, and they just want to build the form. And you get ugly instead of beautiful.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, with my students, when they're, last year that I had some sophomores, and they build their building or their interior in a 3D program, and then they export to a rendering software. And the rendering software, they have all sorts of options of furniture and stuff. It's just, and the tendency is to fill the space, right? There's an empty space, and I'm going to find, this will work there. And it's not design. It's just, it's just, so I always tell my students to let it breathe. Especially when we start to get to putting fake plant images and flowers and stuff, that's distracting. So I think it's along the same lines, just letting it breathe.
And it's such a interesting thing, our tendency to fill the space we have, and yet that's contradictory to what makes us feel like we have enough space to breathe and to think.
Yeah.
If we don't do that, if we don't clutter up our lives with all that, we can think clearly and life feels more pleasant. But for some reason, we want to bring more stuff in, and we don't want to throw stuff away and all that kind of stuff. It's a strange dichotomy.
I had trouble finding a background in my house because of that. Because every place has got so much stuff in it.
Oh,
Um,
I thought maybe
I
from what you're saying, I thought maybe you would have a minimalist home or something.
I am no, I don't. I like things, and I like to, unique things and things to play with. I've got this, flame background, but I mean, it looks for the best lighting. But I have a giant 5 foot tall gumball machine. And
Mm.
as I was coming in here, I said, I should have done it in front of the gumball machine. And my husband was like, that would be a little distracting. Okay. I wanted to ask you if you have ever seen this book, Operative Design. It's
I
spatial
have not.
verbs. Okay, so when I was starting to explore, spatial visualization, and I came across a paper that talked about children who don't have, like, whose parents don't speak to them with a spatial vocabulary, then don't develop, if you're not using it at home, it's part of the, thought process. Whatever words you use at home, that becomes
Mhm.
part of your process. And if you're not using spatial vocabulary, it's not developing that part of the spatial reasoning in children. And so this book has been really interesting. Let's see, I'll send you links to them, but it's just, it talks about, I mean, it's all pictures. And it tells you, like, this is what a splice is. So it's
Hmm.
higher level architectural education, I guess, is, like, I would assume the audience. I think this came out of someone's thesis, but I really like it. And it's a really good resource for just, like, well, when I can't come up with the word for my students, but it's got some really good graphics. And I found this about the same time I think I discovered the KEVA Planks. So
Hmm.
anyway, but it's been really interesting to use that. Um,
And
like,
could you say the name of it or hold it up again so I can see
so
the title?
op-
Maybe hold it a little higher
operatives.
than you did
Oh,
before.
I see.
Okay,
Operative
there.
design,
Okay.
and then there's a follow up called conditional design, which is a little bit more, I don't know, yeah, it's just, I guess, more nuanced, like, combining the different, the different verbs. But this is a catalog of spatial verbs, but I found it very useful.
So would you say, is that something that would be helpful? I'm wondering how low you could go as far as age where that would be helpful. I can see it being high school and college. Would it go down to middle school or elementary, or is it a bit more than you would want for
Um,
that?
I definitely think that it could go down to elementary. I think it's in terms of how you use it would probably change. So, as an instructor, being able to say, so I'll show you, okay, so these are combinations. This is just like this has the words that these are the words that they've used so far. So maybe if you, as an instructor, I could use this list of words, these are the words that we're going to use spatially. Maybe it's for after you've introduced KEVA and, they've yelled out all of their words for how to rotate it. I get hamburger and hot dog a lot with this, how to flip the planks. So, you'll start there and then introduce these words. Instead of hamburger, we could say horizontal.
Okay.
And, we go to intersect and split, splice, embed. And so just developing that sort of language in conversation. This has been helpful.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I do think like even like an elementary student, maybe not all of them, but the ones who love building and doing this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
having those kind of resources that they're an academic stretch for them. There's going to be more than they can deal with. But if those are around in the classroom and they can flip through there and start finding new
Yeah.
words and realize that they can go so much deeper than they've been doing with just the basic words, and they might
Mm-hmm.
be able to grab that and fly with it just because you provided that. Not for everybody,
Absolutely.
but for the ones that love this building, they might love it.
And the ones, with the different types of intelligence, this has almost no words, right? It's images. It tells you the word and then it shows you different examples. But I'm really visual. And so not having to read through pages of definitions is helpful. But, it reinforces that sort of, I guess, learning style. And
Yeah.
I love that. And there's another book I wanted to ask you. I keep forgetting to ask you if you have read, but it's Norman Brosterman, Inventing Kindergarten. Are you familiar?
Oh, I would like that. I have not seen that or read it,
okay.
but that sounds like something I would like.
I had to get it on eBay because I couldn't find a current copy of it, or maybe
Huh.
no, I think there's still current copies. That was because I was in grad school. But it's the history of Friedrich Froebel, and I assume you know of Froebel.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's been really interesting though, because it connects basically all of the major artists and architects from 20th century and before that. They all had this in common, that they've either attended a Froebelian kindergarten, or like Frank Lloyd Wright's mom was trained in that method. And like Bauhaus, their foundations year was developed and implemented by a kindergarten, a Froebelian trained kindergarten teacher who then went to Bauhaus and did it in higher ed. And so it's just really interesting. And the images that you see from this, the block structures that they do, and like the houses that Frank Lloyd Wright designed, you can see the direct correlation and how they learn to think three-dimensionally. And it's been a really interesting resource, and I really like it.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
When you showed me the title, I mean, it's something that I would love. I thought with the title "Inventing Kindergarten," one of my things, since I'm a professional toy inventor, the trying to encourage teachers to think about inspiring the inventive process at a very young age. And so that even a kindergartner would be thinking about inventing stuff. How could we do this? And even it's simple things, if it's something that's already been invented and they don't know that, they have still gone through the exact same process of thinking of something that in their mind it didn't exist, and they thought of something new and ran with it. And so, and that's really, I think, what's happening in this book, even with all the Froebel blocks, because anytime a child is building something with blocks, they're sort of inventing a new way to arrange those and something creative. So that's a very simple form of invention to get that started at a very early age.
And one thing, we've talked about two different kinds of block building. One is, what the KEVA Planks with the challenge cards do is it's a structured block play. So it's got, it's a challenge, and there is a predetermined outcome. And your job is, as the player, is to figure out, like, from the information I'm given, I'm now going to produce this three-dimensional, like, there is a right answer, right?
Right.
And then there's free play, where you just like use your imagination, build whatever. And from the research that I have, from there are papers that have been, not very many of them, but have been published on this, that the structured block play, where there's a predetermined outcome and you're trying to get there, following directions, that provides stronger 3D skills, visualization skills, than free play on its own. I mean, they're both important, but I think that's something that I saw with the KEVA Planks and challenge cards that I couldn't find in any other toy, that, that there's an outcome, and that it's translating from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. Because like I said, like, all of the other toys give you this, 3D isometric view. And so you've got all the information, and you're just sort of, you're not really starting from the place where you have to translate that in your head. And so I spent one of my semesters in grad school, the entire semester was researching toys. I have a big spreadsheet with, these are the different kinds of toys, and this is what they do. And I couldn't find another one that gave 2-dimensional planet elevation drawings, and then you're expected to have a 3-dimensional product. So it was the only answer.
Well, that's exciting to hear about that. And actually, when you flip that card over, it's the isometric view that is that's the solution, because once you see that, it's so obvious. There's no other question what it is or how it fits together. It's blatantly obvious when you see that, it's not obvious with the other one.
Exactly. It's fun to play with. It's fun to do those things, but it's not a challenge like the 2-dimensional piece is, and that takes training.
So for very young children, we created a deck called a little builder's deck that all it has is the isometrics, because
Yeah,
for a very young child, they need that. So they're trying to
yeah,
be able to go from a flat picture and make it. So
absolutely.
we're trying to make it easier. But the
Oh,
next step up
definitely.
from that is what you're doing
Yeah,
with
I guess
that.
I'm coming at it from the perspective of only being around adults. I mean, legally adults, young adults. So I haven't ever started with, you know, developmentally what's appropriate for the younger, the people that the little builders cards. That makes perfect sense to me now.
Right. Well,
Um,
sometime I'd love to get your chart of the toys
okay.
and what they're doing developmentally. I don't know if you've published that anywhere, but
No, it's
um,
just a personal, it's very messy, but I can find it and share it with you.
okay,
Um,
yeah, that'd be fun to see. I remember a previous conversation we had, and you were mentioning something. I think it was from research with young children, but the difference between blocks that have connectors and blocks
mhm,
that do not have connectors. I don't know if you could
yes.
share a little bit about what that's all about.
Yes. So I believe the paper was called Bricks, Blocks, and Planks. And it was the research just went through, I mean, the study was about what children do with the different kinds of blocks and sort of developmentally what happens. And
Hmm.
they're talking about the affordance of each type. So bricks that stack together, you can only do it two directions, right? It's either
Hmm.
parallel or perpendicular. There's no
Right.
angles unless you have an angled piece. And then blocks, given the, proportions, there's less that you can do with them. But planks, you're able to do more. And so developmentally, they're able to process through more, spatially and experiment more. And so the outcome, like the finding in that paper was that planks have more affordance for children to experiment and develop their spatial visualization skills.
Hmm.
So
And when you're talking blocks, you're talking cubes, correct?
yes,
When you were
yes,
just mentioning that. Okay.
yes.
And that's interesting to me because we've for years been doing KEVA Planks, but we have a new game coming out that we're launching. It's called Foros, and it's like a three-dimensional Connect Four. But
Oh,
all of
cool.
the pieces are either cubes or cylinders based on the same dimensions.
Uh-huh.
And so once the main game was playing this four in a row game, but as a person who loves to stack things and have the Kiva background, I
Mm-hmm.
would start making patterns and building things with
Oh,
them,
yeah.
and kind of created a secondary thing where, just like people playing Jenga, they stop playing the game and they just start building things with the blocks. And we're kind of encouraging that. If you got this on your coffee table, if you played the game for a while and you're tired of the game, just build something with the blocks and kind of have a free play. But the interesting thing was that by having everything in a cube block with those same dimensions, I found it much more challenging to think of all the different things you can build with it. And
Yeah.
it's still unlimited, but it really condensed the amount of creativity that I could do. And
Yeah.
granted, there's fewer pieces. There's only 48 pieces in the whole set, but it's not nearly as intuitive or obvious when you get down to the
Yeah.
cubes as it is with the long, thin planks of KEVA Planks.
Yeah. I can see how that would, sort of that activity would wind down faster. Well, I've stacked them like this and I've stacked them like this, and I can't create an arch. I mean, you can, but I can imagine that that's a little bit less entertaining, probably. I don't know,
Right.
but I'm excited about
And,
the game. That sounds really cool.
and then you look at traditionally what people are providing for their young children, which often is just those cubes,
Mm-hmm.
and and kids like to stack things, so they have fun with that.
Yeah.
But they're limited. I mean, an adult gets tired of doing that quickly,
Right.
doing that over and over again, and coming up with things to do. And a lot of children, all they'll do is build the tower over and over again.
Right.
And so if we provide people the opportunity of materials that have the different dimensions to them. And sometimes it's like a lot of classrooms have the larger wood blocks, or they have the
Mm-hmm.
cardboard bricks and things like that, which all do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it expands so much more if someone for their baby toys that they're getting for them, if they get something
Absolutely.
beyond just the traditional cubes, because you can do so much more, and
Yeah,
developmentally for the child, it'll be better for them.
absolutely. Um, I think one of the, I'm trying to remember what it was. What on one of the cards that you sent, the back of it has a model of um, the building in New York. I can't think of the name of it. I think it's in New York. It was built over the church that was sort of offset, and then they realized
Yeah.
there was an engineering issue with that.
The city court
I
building. Yeah.
Yes, I was just elated when I read the history of that next to the model, because that was something that we learned about in architecture school, and I think that is such an interesting and cool way to put architectural history into, and sort of, I guess it's more modern history out into the world, and kind of grab people while they're playing, because
Right.
you definitely learn differently when you're relaxed and playing more, absorbing the information. And so
Yeah.
anyway, I thought that was really cool.
Well, sometime we'll get together and we'll talk all about architecture, because just what you're describing, architecture is such a unique art, and that you have all of the technical things that are required for building that city court building, but
Mm-hmm.
you also have the people things, and the fact that they had a church that they wanted to preserve. I don't know if they wanted to preserve it or the church wouldn't sell or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
was, but you had a people problem
Yeah,
as they're trying to build a
that's for sure.
skyscraper,
Right.
which is why they had to build it on stilts in the first place.
Right.
And then the emotional drama of realizing the responsibility you have when you're building something like that,
Yes.
and what happens if there was a mistake and the big winds are going to
Mm-hmm.
come and knock it down or whatever, and all these
And
people could die.
and all the
And
choices
there
on
is
how to
so much.
proceed with fixing it, the
Yeah.
ethical, I can't imagine that's just such a heavy burden.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much drama, and all of those things intertwined with the history, with the story, with the humanity of that, and then
Mm-hmm.
all of the STEM, the technical things that need to go into it, and then also the artistic design that made that building interesting with the slanted roof at the top. All of those things
Absolutely.
wrapped up together in one thing, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's architecture for that often is students start to look at that maybe when they get in a drafting class in middle school
Right.
or high school, and it's way too late. And if we can be getting very young students excited about architecture,
Mm-hmm.
they will be primed and can fly so much higher once they get advanced further than that.
I think it's interesting when you're talking about the story and the human, the issues that come into play. We're designing for spaces for people to be, and sort of the background of your existence. You know, I guess when people say that, like, good design, you shouldn't notice because it should just work, right? Like,
Mm,
you notice a poorly designed building because it's confusing, or something just doesn't work about it. But I just think that, and that being part of the design thinking or the design process, I mean, it's always been part of the architectural design process, is who is it that we're designing for, and what is it that they need to do here, but developing that empathy and understanding what is the user's story before they get to you.
mm-hmm,
um, so my dad's a storyteller by profession and a musician,
mm-hmm.
and so I just grew up around stories. And so I think being inspired by who people are and what they're doing when they come, like by the time your paths interact, I think is really an interesting component to design. So just thinking about that building and like the issues, the people issues that came up before they built the skyscraper, and then when they realized that there was a problem, like all of that kind of coalescing, I think is a really
Right.
interesting way to get history and architecture out to the all the masses, including the young ones.
Yeah. And it's the stories that make it interesting and come alive. I think that's what grabs people's interest. It's not just a sterile calculations and everything. There's all the stories that wrap in and with the art as well. I was
Definitely.
thinking of, wanted to briefly circle back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with the developing the skills to think spatially, and like
Mm-hmm.
using the three different views, and uh, just the concept that people are not divided necessarily into those who who can think spatially and are the future interior designers and architects. The
Mm-hmm.
skills that you're teaching for these designers are actually lifetime skills for anyone. And so that's why it would be important to be doing the same sort of activities you're doing with your college students, doing them with elementary students,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're going to be a doctor and look at MRIs and X-rays, you need to think
Yes,
spatially. If you're going to be
absolutely.
making dresses, you need to figure out how the arms fit into everything and how to
Mm-hmm.
make it work. If you're ever just redesigning your kitchen and you have to visualize where things, just all of these things in life,
Mm-hmm.
it's a important life skill. And just because someone may not have the initial propensity for it, with the growth mindset, everybody can learn it to some degree, and so everybody needs to learn some, and those who love it may become future interior designers and
Mm-hmm.
architects. But
It's interesting because of how spatial skills impact, math and understanding. I guess on like surface level, that almost doesn't make sense. But then after understanding and reading and writing all of the things from grad school, it's just interesting the impact. So it's not like, with math and having to repeat all of the like, we're going to take the times tests again and again and again. And so you just memorize it, but are you able to think mathematically? No. But if you
mm-hmm,
improve your spatial skills, then those concepts start to make more sense instead of having to memorize them. I was not mathematically inclined as a kid. I absolutely
mm-hmm.
despised math. And it wasn't until, I just suffered through, and I got to college and I was like, if I can pass calculus, I will continue on this architecture path. And I passed. So I kept going. But it wasn't until I got to building mechanics and building structures, so after calculus 1, that I started to like, it was so fun because then there was something where, but the math made sense because it was related to something I was interested in. And so starting with this, playing and understanding those concepts of, and sort of not even understanding the concepts, but just developing them in the background, it makes so much sense now.
Yeah, but
But
we
it makes such
need
a
so many of
difference.
us. So many of us need a reason to be doing it, and I think a lot of our education, we're just where you need to learn these skills, and the teacher. I mean, calculus. I was doing great in all math until calculus was kind of what knocked me out. I survived it and said, I cannot go any further than this. I don't get it. I don't enjoy this, and a lot of that was because I could not think of any practical reasons that I would use
Yes.
that. And I'm a retired veterinarian, so I was on my way to vet school to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm veterinarian, as I can tell, I became a veterinarian. I never used calculus a single time to figure out anything in the world
Isn't
of
that
veterinary
interesting?
medicine.
Yeah.
And it was primarily at that point a way to prove whether you were smart enough maybe to
Right.
survive vet school,
Which is
but to make learning, to make math have a reason to learn it and have the
mm-hmm.
practical applications where luckily you
Absolutely.
survived just long enough to get there,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't gut it out
Yeah.
that far.
Yeah.
And so doing things like the activities that you're proposing that we started with, that you were doing at the conference, those are things, and maybe we'll come back and talk about this more sometime also, just about using play, and that it makes the learning, you start with the language of children, which is play, and it makes
Mm-hmm.
it fun. You have a reason to do it because you want to build this thing
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than just going through the
And
motions.
it's low stakes. If we're playing, then the outcome isn't as important to me as we're playing for play's sake. So I'm not worried about getting a grade or messing up or embarrassing myself because we're playing,
Right.
And as adults, we still play, but we use different vocabulary for it. Like, oh, I'm just experimenting, or I'm exploring, or I'm, looking into this, messing around with, but we don't say play, but that's what it is.
Right. All right. Well, I would like to get together with you again and sometime talk about play in depth and talk about
Absolutely.
architecture,
I would love that.
especially architecture with young people,
Excellent.
and why that's so important. So this has been fantastic, and I did want to circle back just for to highlight the practicalness of the exercise that you were doing, where you did that
Mm-hmm.
in 3 phases. And I've used it in a lot of different ways, and I really like the structure of that. And because a teacher may have one deck of brain builder cards or 3D challenge cards, and in a classroom of students, and how do you do
Mm-hmm.
that? So your idea of projecting one and having backs to that as a way to work through, you're just using up one card to do that,
Yes.
and everybody's getting the introductory experience,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all the communication at the beginning.
And
And
while
so I love that idea.
everyone can look at the other construction and kind of get, what am I doing differently? But no one's tempted to turn over the card because they're not in control of it.
Yes. So you're
Yeah.
controlling that, and you're also opening it up totally that it's okay to look around and learn, because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes in school it's don't look at your neighbor, don't cheat, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And you're letting them know that that's part of this learning process. We just need
Yeah.
to figure this out.
Yeah.
And then just going to the next step of allowing them to use their hands so they can still succeed, and you're making it, just adding one more level of difficulty to it. They sometimes they're called scaffolding, but they're succeeding at each level by the way you're doing that, and you're not eating through a lot of cards at one time,
Right.
to do that, and you're managing this activity with a large number of people. So that's just really practical help for anyone. And these cards are one of the most popular items we have for educators. Anybody that gets KEVA Planks, if they want to know what
Mm-hmm.
else they should get, we say get the 3D challenge cards.
Absolutely.
And just so people know, the Brain Builder cards were the first thing we came out with, and those are put out by our partner Mindware, and those are all the size of playing deck cards. And then the 3D challenge cards we make those specifically for educators, and you can get just the cards themselves, and they're 4x6, so they're bigger, they're meatier, they come with a little bit of a case, and we found that people like to have a little bit bigger size and a little bit thicker on those. So these were made specifically with educators in mind, the 3D challenge cards, but they do the exact same thing, and they're different challenges. So if you have a worn out deck of Brain
Mm-hmm.
Builders, you can get some 3D challenges, or vice versa. If you want more
really
of the 3D
excited
challenges, you could.
to see that they're different, so you can use
Yeah.
all of them.
Right. And you can do what you were doing, because with your college students, you were having them do that, kind of make their own, where they're creating something and
Mm-hmm.
and drawing it. So, and even for young children, if you run through all the cards, you can give them 5 or 10 KEVA Planks and make something, and then you make those drawings.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of also the next level. And so if you can share your drawing and give it to somebody else, and they can build it from that, that's exactly what we're trying to communicate. So
that would be really interesting to have, everybody draw their construction and then mix it up and pass them out and see what we get. That would be really cool.
So anyway, the way that you were managing that for your classes and then sharing that at the conference, that was a very nicely organized way to work your way from the introduction to it to getting more and more difficult. So I appreciate that practical idea to share with the world. So, well, this has been fun. I think we'll cut it off here, and then we'll regroup sometime and talk about plate and architecture.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. I enjoyed it very much, and I look forward to doing it again.